There's a kind of pain that doesn't bleed, doesn't bruise, doesn't even make a sound. It just sits in your chest and waits. It waits in the silence after the text that never came, in the pause where warmth used to live, in the strange emptiness of watching someone pull away from you, not with cruelty, not with anger, but with distance so cold it makes you question whether any of it was ever real. And that is what makes it unbearable. Not the ending, the confusion. Because if they had hated you, you could have made sense of it. If they had betrayed you, lied to you, replaced you overnight, at least your mind would have something solid to hold. But this is different. This is someone who looked at you like they felt something deep. Someone who opened for a moment. Someone who let you touch a place inside them they barely let themselves feel. And then disappeared into themselves, as if intimacy had become a fire they suddenly needed to escape. So you replay everything. What changed, what you said, what you should have done differently. Whether your love was too much, whether your needs were too heavy, whether your presence became pressure. And without realizing it, you begin doing the most dangerous thing of all. You start abandoning yourself to understand someone who is already abandoning themselves. That is the brutal truth. The more you chase clarity from an avoidant person, the more you train your nervous system to believe love must be earned through confusion, patience, and pain. You stop asking, "Why are they pulling away?" and you start asking, "How do I become easier to stay for?" You shrink your feelings. You soften your needs. You become less expressive, less direct, less alive. You call it understanding. You call it maturity. You call it giving space. But if you are honest, what you are really doing is negotiating with your own worth. You are trying to make yourself more acceptable to someone whose deepest pattern is not to receive love without feeling trapped by it. And this is where everything changes. Because what looks like indifference in an avoidant person is often not indifference at all. It is overwhelm. That matters more than you think. Avoidant attachment is not built on a lack of emotion. It is built on a fear of what emotion does once it gets too close. When real intimacy starts to form, the nervous system of an avoidant person often reads connection as danger. Not because you are dangerous, but because closeness awakens old emotional memories their body never learned how to hold. The amygdala starts scanning, cortisol rises, the body looks for relief, and distance becomes that relief. So while you are moving closer because connection feels beautiful, they may be pulling back because connection feels destabilizing. Your warmth does not register as warmth alone. It can register as pressure, expectation, exposure, dependency, a loss of control. And this is why the story hurts so much. Because they may care deeply while acting like they don't care at all. They may miss you and avoid you in the same breath. They may feel drawn to you, soothed by you, changed by you, and still disappear the moment the bond starts asking them to stay emotionally present inside it. This is why logic alone will never heal you. Because the wound was never just about what they did. It was about what their distance activated in you. The part of you that panics in silence. The part of you that feels unchosen when someone withdraws. The part of you that confuses being emotionally affected with being emotionally connected. And the part of you that still believes if you can just say the perfect thing, wait the right amount of time, become calm enough, valuable enough, irresistible enough, they will finally stop running and choose you the way you have been choosing them. But here is the truth most people are too afraid to say. The emotional bond avoidants struggle to break is not the one they can fully possess. It is the one they cannot fully control. And control begins to slip the moment you stop reaching. Silence is the concept most people misunderstand. They use silence as a tactic, a strategy, a performance. They go quiet while secretly watching, secretly hoping, secretly aching for a reaction. But that kind of silence is still attachment speaking. It is still hunger wearing a mask. Real silence is different. Real silence is when your energy stops leaning towards someone who cannot hold it. Real silence is when you stop handing your inner world to a person who only knows what to do with it when it is far enough away to feel safe. Real silence is not punishment. It is the removal of emotional access. And for the avoidant, that is when something unsettling begins. Because when you chase, they can organize themselves around your pursuit. Your messages, your concern, your emotional availability, your attempts to understand them. All of it keeps you psychologically close, even if they remain behaviorally distant. They do not have to fully face your absence, because your energy never actually leaves. You are still there, reaching through the gap, feeding the bond, protecting the thread. But when you become truly still, something changes inside them. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but deeply. The human brain is wired to notice what is missing. Dopamine does not only respond to reward, it responds to anticipation, uncertainty, interrupted patterns. When your attention has been consistently available, and then it is no longer there, the pattern breaks. And broken patterns become mentally loud, especially to someone who depends on distance to regulate emotion. At first, they may feel relief. No pressure, no difficult conversation, no emotional intensity. Space, air, quiet. They tell themselves this is better. They return to routines, work, distractions, surface conversations. They act fine. Maybe they even look lighter. But then the silence stops being relief and starts becoming a mirror. Because now they are left alone with the emotional residue they used to outrun through withdrawal. Now there is no message arriving to reassure them that the bond still exists. No evidence that you are still emotionally there. No small opening through which they can return on their own terms. And that is when the bond begins to haunt them. Not because you manipulated them, because your absence finally made the connection real. They think about the last moment they felt safe with you, and it hits them at a strange hour, maybe while driving, maybe while standing in a grocery store, maybe while lying in bed pretending to sleep. They remember the softness in your face when you were trying not to push, the way you understood more than most people ever did, the way your presence felt grounding, not because you were perfect, but because something in you reached places they keep boarded up. And suddenly, the distance they fought for does not feel like freedom. It feels like loss. This is where avoidants often become confusing again. They may not come back with a grand confession. They may not say, "I was overwhelmed and now I realize what you meant to me." That would require too much direct vulnerability, too much exposure, too much surrender. Instead, they circle. A casual message, a story view, a check-in that sounds detached, a vague opening, a memory dropped into conversation like it meant nothing, but it meant something. Because when an avoidant feels the bond slipping beyond reach, they often test for access before they admit longing. They do not want the full weight of the feeling. They want proof that the door is still unlocked. And this is the moment most people ruin everything, because the pain in them is still starving. So the second that small sign appears, they flood the space again. They explain, reassure, overgive, over-open, over-interpret. They turn one breadcrumb into hope, one message into a future, one sign of curiosity into evidence of change. and the avoidant feels it instantly. The pressure returns, the emotional field becomes crowded again, and the same nervous system that was beginning to feel your absence now begins to seek escape from your presence. Pattern restored. This is why breaking the cycle requires something harder than silence. It requires non-reactivity, not numbness, not pretending you do not care, not becoming cold because they were cold. Non-reactivity is when your self-worth no longer rises and falls with their signals. It is when their return does not hypnotize you. It is when you can feel the pull, recognize the dynamic, and remain rooted in yourself long enough to see whether they are actually capable of showing up differently. That kind of steadiness is rare, and it is powerful. Because avoidants are used to one of two things: people who leave quickly, or people who lose themselves trying to stay. They are not used to someone who can care deeply without collapsing into pursuit. Someone who can be warm without becoming available at any cost. Someone who does not punish, does not perform, does not beg, and does not chase. That is the bond they struggle to break. Not because it is loud, because it is regulating. Because it confronts them with a form of love that does not invade, but also does not abandon itself. Imagine what happens inside them when they send something small, something casual, something designed to test the emotional temperature, and they do not find the same version of you waiting on the other side. Not angry, not desperate, not eager to prove, just calm, present, unhooked. Now they cannot place you where they used to place you. You no longer fit the old pattern. You are not the pursuer. You are not the rescuer. You are not the emotional safety net they can drop and retrieve when it suits their fear. You become uncertain to them, and uncertainty pulls attention. Then the thoughts get louder. What if this time they really let go? What if you are no longer available in the same way? What if the person who understood them most has finally stopped revolving around them? What if they misread your love as permanence? And beneath all of that, the real fear begins to stir. What if they lost something they do not know how to replace? Because what avoidants often miss too late is not just affection. It is emotional sanctuary. The rare experience of being seen without being controlled, wanted without being consumed, loved without being forced open before they were ready. And when that kind of bond is no longer accessible, it does not leave cleanly. It lingers in the body, in the memories, in the unfinished feeling, in the way ordinary moments start carrying your ghost. But this is where you need to hear something difficult. Do not confuse being missed with being chosen. Do not confuse their obsession with your absence for readiness to build something healthy with your presence. People can ache for what they still do not know how to hold. They can want you and still wound you. They can return and still repeat. They can feel the loss intensely and still not have the capacity to love in a way that protects your nervous system, your dignity, your peace. That is why your power is not in making them miss you. Your power is in no longer needing their confusion to define your value. Because the real identity shift begins when you understand this. The part of you that wanted to be unforgettable to them was often the same part that had forgotten itself. You were so focused on whether they could feel your absence that you stopped feeling your own presence. You monitored their withdrawal more than your own exhaustion. You studied their defenses more than your own wounds. You became an expert in their patterns, while your own heart stood there, unheld, waiting for you to finally turn around and choose it. So yes, silence affects them. Yes, non-reactivity unsettles them. Yes, the bond can grow heavier in their mind once your energy is truly gone. But none of that should be the center anymore. The center is you. The center is the day your body no longer panics when someone cannot meet you. The center is the moment you stop romanticizing emotional unavailability as depth. The center is when you realize that being deeply affected by someone does not mean they are deeply aligned with you. And the center is when you stop asking, "How do I become the one they can't forget?" and start asking, "Why was I ever willing to fight this hard for someone who could feel me, but not hold me?" That question changes everything. Because once you answer it honestly, the spell starts to break. You see how much energy went into waiting, how much beauty went into proving, how much life went into reading between lines that should have been spoken clearly. And then something inside you stands up. Quietly, not dramatically, not for show, just a clean, inner decision. No more. No more shrinking to fit someone's fear. No more confusing inconsistency with mystery. No more calling self-abandonment love. No more handing your softness to people who only know how to touch it with distance. This is the part where you become dangerous to the pattern. Because once you learn to hold your own nervous system through silence, their silence loses its power to define you. Once you stop reacting to every flicker of attention, their uncertainty can no longer control the emotional climate inside you. Once you realize your worth is not proven by who returns after losing you, but by what you refuse to tolerate after finding yourself, the whole dynamic changes. And that is when you become unforgettable in the only way that matters. Not because they cannot stop thinking about you, but because you finally stop betraying yourself for the chance to be loved by someone who is terrified of love. That kind of self-respect has a frequency. People feel it. Avoidants feel it too. They feel the difference between someone who wants them and someone who no longer needs their permission to feel whole. And whether they come back or not, whether they miss you or bury it or circle in silence for months, your life is no longer built around their capacity. It is built around your own. Your capacity to stay with yourself. Your capacity to tell the truth. Your capacity to walk away from emotional starvation without turning it into a love story. This is what power actually is. Not control over their mind, not revenge through absence, not winning the breakup you never wanted. Power is the ability to remain rooted in your value when someone else's fear tries to make you question it. Power is emotional sobriety. Power is no longer being seduced by half-love. Power is being able to love deeply without abandoning discernment. And power is knowing that the bond they struggle to break may be real, but your job was never to become unforgettable through pain. Your job is to become irreplaceable to yourself. So let them wrestle with the silence if they must. Let them feel the space where your energy used to wait for them. Let them meet the ache of what they could not hold. But you do not stand at the door of your own life hoping someone emotionally unavailable finally learns how to enter. Walk forward. Become fuller. Become calmer. Become less impressed by intensity and more devoted to peace. Because the moment you stop chasing emotional permission from the unavailable, you do not just heal, you transform. And that transformation is felt in your voice, in your boundaries, in your standards, in the way you no longer confuse longing with destiny, in the way your heart stops reaching for people who only know how to love from a distance. That is when your worth becomes undeniable, not because they finally saw it, because you did. And once you do, everything that once made you beg for crumbs begins to look exactly like what it was. A pattern, not a soulmate. A wound, not a future. A lesson, not your home. So if they are struggling now, if your silence has become louder in their mind than your presence ever was, let it teach them what your constant availability never could. But let it teach you something too. That your love was never weak because it stayed. It was just misplaced. Now place it where it can grow, inside a self that no longer waits to be chosen in order to feel real. Inside a life that does not collapse when someone withdraws. Inside an identity that understands this with absolute clarity. You were never hard to love. They were hard to stay open. And that is no longer your burden to carry.